Taxes. Blood pressure begins to rise with just hearing the word. The word conjures up negative implications about the ever-intrusive and long arm of government. It seems that taxes are everywhere, federal, state, and local, and so many local forms. There's property tax, sales tax, and yes, the topic of today's Rider Nation Station podcast, the income tax. It always seems as if we are paying a tax, and it seems they come due at inopportune times. Margaret Mitchell wrote in her classic novel, Gone with the Wind, death, taxes, and childbirth. There's never any convenient time for any of them. I liken taxes to insurance, a necessary evil that allows me to place my head on the pillow and sleep in comfort knowing I am protected. With insurance, you can have too much, and you can have too little, and neither is a good approach. Just like the aforementioned necessary evil, you can have too much taxation, and yes, you can have even too little taxation. One of the most widely cited Supreme Court justices, Oliver Wendell Holmes, opined, "I hate paying taxes, but I love the civilization they give me." Everything in life is finding the appropriate balance. For St. Mary's and those who work in St. Mary's, 1.5% of their income is taxed at the local level. Since 1985, St. Mary's have stated with their votes that 1.5% is the appropriate amount of income taxation. On the May 4th election, St. Mary's will be asked if they would like to make the last half of the current 1.5% permanent instead of being renewed every 10 years like it has been since 1985. Today we have members from the Levy Committee and the city to explain their rationale to establish permanency of this last 0.5%. Our first guest is Councilor at Large Dan Uhlenhaeg. Dan, thanks for being here.
Thanks. Good to be here, Doug.
And Dan, you're part, obviously, of City Council, but you're part of the committee for this levy campaign.
Yes, I was asked to do this. Have more time since I retired in September, and it just seemed like in the city administration decided that it was the right time to try and make the 0.5% permanent. After all, it's 35 years old, and it's been passed easily through all those years. So why not make it permanent? And it addresses so many important things.
And so you've talked about it has had a storied past. The 0.5% permissive started in 1985.
Correct.
And every 10 years it's been brought to the voters, and as you mentioned, has been very successful in being passed. So talk a little bit about the history of this 0.5% income tax.
Well, I can remember in 1985 when I still had hair, a lot younger, and didn't take as active a part as in the workings of the city government, just being an ordinary citizen, just reading what I saw in the papers. But there was articles appearing that rescue vehicles were getting old, falling apart. In particular, I think I remember something about a fire truck being so old that they were afraid to take it out. And so this 0.5% was put forth, specifically earmarked to improve the services of fire and police and parks, engineering, general services. It touches many service departments throughout the city. And so it's vitally important for us. And as the years went by, you saw the purchases. The city was always very transparent as to where the money was spent, how it was spent. And so here we are in 2021, wanting to finally make the 0.5% permanent. We've done it for 35 years, so why not make it permanent? And as you said in the beginning in your intro, I don't like taxes any more than anybody else. You can ask anybody I know. I despise taxes right next to the next American. But this is something that has done tremendously well for the city. And you need only look at our streets, and there's a good starting point.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And every 10 years, the St. Maryans have had basically an evaluation to make. You've got a grade card. How has the city been doing with these capital expenditures? And streets are probably the A+ for St. Mary's, especially If you go west, if you go east, north,
No other
south,
town
you look
like
at
it.
streets, you look at curbing. St. Mary's is probably A+.
Yeah, yeah. Like the big snowstorm we had, I think it was February 16th. I live on a cul-de-sac. My wife and I rode around after we helped our neighbors, each other, clean out snow. And we rode around it was only about 10 o'clock in the morning, so it was reasonably early yet. And our streets were in incredible shape, just incredible shape for that. I couldn't find a problem anywhere. We drove all over town, just out of curiosity.
How much does this levy traditionally bring in to the city?
Between 1.3 and 1.5 million dollars.
And is it utilized for personnel, or is it strictly
No.
for capital expenditures?
Capital improvements.
And let's touch base a little bit for the viewer. What is a capital
A
improvement?
capital improvement is any fire truck, ambulance, canine vehicle, things to help our services be better, not only safer for the entire city, but better for our city employees too, and those who serve our departments.
So something physical, tangible, has a shelf life of
Over
5+ years,
yes,
and
and
that's
over
what
$500.
this 0.5% permissive every 10 year goes toward.
Yep, it's specifically earmarked for infrastructure also,
Okay.
and for all those important things I just mentioned.
So before we take a break and move on to the next guest here, Dan, how do we best classify this? 2015, St. Marion said we wanted to go for another 10 years. You're coming on the ballot in 2021, 4 years before
Yes.
it has an expiration date. Is it a new tax? Is it a replacement? What is this?
Well, the way everything stands right now with the world as it is, and the city finances are healthy. They always have been. There's no question about that. This is a time where we thought it'd be a good time to make it permanent. This gives the city more confidence in borrowing power for the big ticket items. Like if we have a loan for like $20 million, the savings on the interest alone could be as much as $200,000. And everybody likes to save money. And that it's a substantial savings to the taxpayer.
And just for one clarifying point, it's 1.5% income tax right now.
And no new tax.
If this passes, it remains 1.5%
1.5%.
income tax.
Yeah,
It's not another 0.5% on top of the 1.5.
No.
It remains
Yeah.
a 1.5%
This
income
is specifically
tax. It's
why
just
we're
permanent.
here. It's specifically why we're here tonight doing this vodcast with you, because the most important thing to put forth is this is no new tax. There's no new money generated from this if we do it this way. It's the same old 0.5%, and it's the same old total 1.5% that St. Marion's has been paying since 1985. Then, legislative-wise, we would just do away with the language that we have now and enact the new legislation that makes it, the city of St. Mary's would have a 1.5% income tax base.
So if this passes, it supplants the 2015 passage of the 10-year.
No new tax.
All righty. Dan Uhlenhake, Counselor at Large, part of City Council and part of the Levy Committee. Thank you for being here. We'll take a break,
You bet.
and we're going to bring on our next guest.
Okay, thank you, Doug.
Alrighty, welcome back, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to Craig Muller, the Superintendent of Community Development and Engineering. Hopefully I got that long title right, Craig.
Close, yes.
All right. So somebody's got to be in charge of the infrastructure development, and probably one of the most noticeable items in that category are the streets. And you know, as we mentioned earlier with Dan, that's one of probably the greatest assets that St. Mary's does have. And so talk to me about what your department does and how it's benefited since 1985 from that 0.5% dedicated income tax.
One of our biggest duties for the city is to maintain the streets and make sure that the surfaces are reliable and the storm sewers are good, things like that. We do annually a street program for the city, which typically takes in about 2 to 3 reconstruction streets each year. We'll resurface about possibly 5 streets each year with that. And along with that, we'll also do storm sewers, storm drainage, things like that. We'll go out and do all the engineering on it, take care of the plans, do the bidding, and also take care of the inspection as the project's being completed.
And that's all done internally?
That is all done internal, yes. For all our streets here, we do not typically hire anything out on that. So that's one benefit of the engineering department for the city.
Okay. But streets isn't the only thing that is under your realm. What are some of the other aspects that you have, and how it definitely is impacted by this 0.5% income tax?
We do have to take care of the bridges in the city. Those are all, we have 4 pedestrian bridges, 4 road bridges that we have to replace eventually. That money goes towards the assistance of that. And I do want to stress, with all these projects that we do try to go out for grant money. And, you know, not only the voted tax money, but also grant money we use for this. So like this East Spring Street reconstruction that's going on right now, that is partially funded by OPWC money, and a portion of it's also being funded by the voted tax money on that.
And I think I can come up with what OPWC is, but let's, for the viewers' behalf.
Yes, it's Ohio Public Works Commission. It's an issue 1 money that gets voted on through the state.
Okay. Another bridge that isn't here. Mm-hmm. It's been in the planning process for a long time. The pedestrian bridge across the highway to the school. Talk to me about what your role is there, and does that get funded in any way from this permissive tax that is trying to be made permanent?
Yes, that bridge project has been ongoing since 2016. We made application to ODOT for funding to fund that project. The project is currently in the final design stages. This bridge will go from the south side of US Route 33 to the north side over to the school. There'll be a walk path from Scott Street up to the bridge, which would be behind KSM currently. The project is funded 90% through ODOT funding, and 10% of it will be funded through city funds, and a portion of that we could be using the voted tax money for. Voted tax money help pay for the engineering of the bridge, because bridge engineering is way over above our capabilities, so we do hire that portion out. And it also paid for the right-of-way acquisition for the bridge.
And that's scheduled to have construction start?
That was scheduled to be constructed in the spring of 2022.
With completion in 2022? In 2022,
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other aspects that this funding would help with in future projects that are coming up besides the pedestrian bridge?
Yeah, there's stormwater retention is a big thing here lately. The last few years we've seen a lot of extra rainfalls. We've seen a lot of extra flooding happen within the city. So it does help assist with stormwater retention for maintenance of the existing ponds that we have, and we are looking at creating a couple new stormwater retention ponds, and that money could go towards using it for portions of those projects as well. Other projects that we would do, we're looking at new traffic signal upgrade out on Indiana Avenue next to the shopping center. There's been an increasing need out there for pedestrian crossing out there. So we are looking at getting some, again, ODOT funding to assist us in creating that pedestrian crossing so pedestrians can cross safely. As you know, there's 50 new apartments that's going to be actually in the process of being constructed out there currently. So with increased pedestrian traffic, we need increased safety out there.
Definitely, and you know, the things that we definitely see with our eyeballs every day, infrastructure-wise in St. Mary's, we give that A+ too. But something that we don't really think about seeing, but definitely tasting and utilizing is water.
Yes.
And I would have to grade St. Mary's with A+ water, being a benefactor of the Taze River system, and not necessarily totally under your realm, but talk about the water department and how that is impacted by the funds from the income tax.
Yes, as everybody knows, we did just complete a new water treatment plant. However, that money was not, the voted tax money was not utilized for the construction of that plant, but what the money does go for with the water systems are water towers. Water towers are there for fire safety and for just storage capacity for our water system. So we do use this money to help maintain those water towers. Fortunately, we've not had to build new ones for a long time, but we do have to paint them. And we just got done with the Main Street Tower, which cost over close to $500,000 just to maintain it, just to paint it. So it's not cheap to do that, so we do utilize this money to help assist with that as well.
Any last items that you want to add that I haven't asked about, Craig?
I will say, you know, since 1986, we was able to reconstruct quite a few streets in the city, as the residents here can see. We're not done yet. We've got several more streets to be reconstructed and a lot of maintenance to take place over the next however many years, you know. So the items that we do are not cheap, and we just need this continued support from the city.
On street reconstruction, how many birthdays can it have before you're back to reconstruct it again?
A street actual reconstruction can go, 50 plus years. The resurfacings typically take place every 15 to 18 years on the resurface.
All righty. Thank you, Craig Muller. We appreciate it, and we'll take a break and be back with our Fire Chief, Doug Ayers.
All right, thank you, Doug.
Alrighty, we're back here with Fire Chief Doug Ayers. Doug, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
Probably my favorite topic, the fire trucks. The big red, shiny fire trucks. Back in 1985, I was riding my Huffy 10-speed somewhere around St. Mary's and would always make certain that I rode it by the fire department to see the fire trucks. How has the fire department been impacted with the funding of the 0.5% permissive tax?
So the voted tax goes towards a lot of equipment, tools, vehicles that we utilize in the fire service and the EMS service. Not only does it purchase trucks, ambulances, as you mentioned at the beginning, it also goes towards the equipment that goes on those. Just an example is with our last engine, that cost almost $750,000 for the engine. There's also close to $100,000 worth of equipment that goes on after that. And that includes the hose, the nozzles, thermal imaging cameras, and other various equipment, extrication tools, the cutters, the spreaders, all the hydraulics that go into that. And it, also going over onto the EMS side, which the community sees more of out of us anymore, because, you know, the EMS is 80% of what we do anymore. You're looking at almost $150,000 to $200,000 worth of equipment that goes on an ambulance.
That just goes on it.
On it, after the purchase of the ambulance. And this goes from the laryngoscopes all the way to the cardiac monitors. We also have the mechanical CPR device that we have on those, and having those has been a tremendous help to us, because it frees a person up in the back of the ambulance if you have a cardiac event going on. You don't have to utilize one person just to be doing CPR. We have this mechanical device that we can put on, and it frees that person up to help with doing ventilations or administering drugs, doing record keeping of it. We have to keep track of all of these things, all while driving down the road. And so the voted tax goes to purchasing equipment like that. And over the years, it's purchased multiple ambulances. And part of that reason is the amount of runs that we have. We have to have the 3 ambulances that we have. Okay. Because there's a lot of times 2 of them's out at a time, covering things like that. And so this voted tax helps us keep up not only the vehicles, but the equipment that goes on the vehicles.
And from when you first started, does it seem that technology increases so much that purchases turn over a lot faster?
Yes. From the time I started to now, exponentially things have changed. We've went from writing our reports out on paper and then coming back and plugging them into the computer to now, you know, we've got our iPads, everything's done electronic. It gets sent to the billing company electronically. It goes to the State of Ohio EMS department electronically, and that was also purchased with the voted tax. And I mean, this technology is just going to keep going. As much as it has changed from when I've started, and being able to track where our vehicles are. We have a software program that it tracks our iPads, so it helps, you know, with dispatch also, that they know how far away we are from a scene. You know, if, for instance, a car accident scene, for example, the police officers, law enforcement, they might be calling back to dispatch. How far out are they? You know, they could never tell before. Okay. You know, they would just say, hey, tell them to step it up. Mm-hmm. You know, we always get told to step it up even though we're going as fast as we can. But now they can look at the screen and say, you know, they're a mile out. Yeah. So having technology like that, it helps us become more effective and more efficient in, you know, doing the different jobs that we have to do, from structure fires to EMS to extrications.
So you have some big ticket items.
We do have big ticket items.
It would be awesome if they were more just flashy and showy in parades. But I think for the residents, when it's needed, it's good to know that you've got the proper equipment that is going to make it from A to B to take care of whatever that situation is that you face.
And we do have the proper equipment. I'm very pleased with the equipment that we have. The guys of the department and we do a lot of research looking at the equipment, reading articles, you know, keeping up on the changes in the technology and the changes of protocols and the different ways that we can respond. It's not uncommon, you know, almost every week, one of the guys, they'll pop their head in and say, Chief, did you see this article? Look at this. Look how this department's changed this response and how it's helped them. And so we're constantly watching that technology because we want to we don't necessarily want the latest and greatest of everything, but we want to keep up with the trends as things are going, because if you don't try to keep up with it, you're just going to fall behind. And this voted tax helps us do that. And I'd also like to add, in an indirect way, the voted tax helps us with our training and our education. Because if we didn't have this voted tax, these vehicles and this equipment would be coming out of the general fund, which is what our education comes out of. So if we're paying for vehicles and equipment out of the general fund, we have to take that money away from other things, whether that be education, personnel, items like that. So while the voted tax doesn't go towards that, it helps us in those venues.
Well, thank you, Doug, for your insight as to how this voted tax helps the residents of St. Mary's with their fire and EMS protection. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome back, here with Police Chief Jake Sutton. Jake, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I guess what I want to say to start off is probably it used to be historically that a police officer is a police officer is a police officer. 10 years plus, there used to be a commercial that said, "This isn't your grandfather's Buick." I'm guessing from the outside looking in that things are a lot different being a police officer in today's world than what it used to be. Police officers is a police officer from one generation to the next.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can tell you in my 22 years, it has changed so much. Technology has changed, training has changed, just everything about the job has changed. So, keeping up with that, the trends, is vitally important to, especially for us, to provide the service that we need to our citizens. Solving crimes and making our streets safe is our number one mission. We want people to walk down the streets and not have fear of crime. We want them to enjoy, play and live in St. Mary's and feel safe. And that's our mission, and it always will be, especially while I'm here. And it takes a lot to do that. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you this 0.5% absolutely helps us outlive our mission for our citizens and for our community. Because if we didn't have it, I can tell you a lot of services would not be there. It's vitally important for our citizens' safety, and it's vitally important for our officers' safety as well.
Yeah, and just even the types of crimes that you've dealt with recently is a lot different, and it's taking that proper training and making certain that the proper protective equipment is utilized. And a shotgun in a car was a typical thing for one generation of officer to the next, to the next, to the next, and those have all changed. So you really are dealing with dynamic and serious shifts in how crime is evolved. But with all that said, it's a relatively low crime area to live in, and it's awesome that we've got great streets and curbing and things that we see, but it's even more awesome that, for the most part, it is a relatively low crime.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think one of the things that we have to do as a police department, and we do well, is we have to be prepared. We have to be prepared for things that can come our way. We don't wait until something happens and then react to it. We have to try to anticipate that. Mm-hmm. One of those is countywide. We've done active shooter training for all of our teachers and all of our educational districts in our officers. But having the proper equipment to respond to that is important too. So out of the 0.5%, we buy rifles. We buy our ballistic wear that we have, our tactical vests that every officer has and carries with them that stops rifle rounds.
And that has a shelf life in and of itself.
It does.
Just because you bought it doesn't mean it's going to stay with the officer for the rest of his career.
No, absolutely not. Our body armor that we wear under our uniforms lasts 5 years. That's purchased out of this, but the external tactical vests and helmets that we have, they last anywhere from 5 to 10 years. We just made a purchase
because they expired, and it was about $12,000 just to make sure that our officers have the best up-to-date equipment, especially when it comes to active shooters.
And one of the most integral parts, again, from an outsider looking in for a police officer, has to be communication. Communication from one officer to the next, but communication from the dispatcher
Absolutely.
back to the officers. They're the eyes, the ears, the everything of that officer. And does that play a role at all in this voted tax?
Absolutely. It's actually a large role. We just upgraded our radios, which was right around $50,000. But a part of that, our dispatchers sitting up there taking those calls, they enter it into a computer system that tracks all of our calls, tracks our reports, and that reporting system itself was over $300,000 that was paid for out of the voted tax. Having computer-aided dispatch, having information at our dispatcher's fingertips as well as our officers' fingertips in the patrol cars is vital to make sure that we're efficient and effective in our criminal investigations. So yeah, it's a big ticket item and it's important. Our records, we investigate over 2,000 crimes a year and incidents that in our computer system. Every piece of that is stored somewhere on a hard drive in our agency, and there's a lot of cost when it comes to storage of information. And we have to keep some things for life or forever. Some things have a 50 years, some are 30. So there's a lot associated with that storage and investigating crimes.
This one I don't know that I like. Upgrade radar equipment.
Yeah, that's one of the...
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I know. But one of the things, we have to stay up on that and the equipment. There's a lot of traffic stops, and people see in our town a lot of traffic stops. Mm-hmm. And they're like, our police force is very proactive. Well, I can tell you their main objective, especially right now in the meth epidemic and the fentanyl epidemic that we have right here in St. Mary's, is interdiction of drugs. Just a couple weeks ago, one of a St. Mary's resident just got sentenced to 4 to 6 years in prison for one of the largest meth seizures that we had on a traffic stop by a canine that was paid for by our 0.5%. So it's so vitally important for the safety that we're being proactive and conducting those traffic stops, many times with radars, so that we can get that probable cause and make sure that we interdict crime, because that's our number one purpose.
All righty, so public safety, an integral part of a community and definitely impacted by this voted tax. And yeah, some things could come out of the general fund, as Chief Ayers was mentioning in the previous interview, but that then impacts other expenditures that have to be found somewhere else or cut somehow.
Yeah, I can tell you we are so thankful and blessed to have this 0.5%. The way that we can operate, the personnel that we have, is only because this equipment can come out of that voted tax. If it wasn't, just like Chief Ayers said, we would have to make, cutting personnel, cutting equipment, cuts in training, and they all affect each other. And that's not something that I've had to do or even think about, because we've been blessed for 35 years to have this. I hope that we never go to that point. Now, that's not what we're talking about today, but it is so important to the safety of our citizens, of our officers. Right now, nationally, police training is in the spotlight. Use of force training is in the spotlight. And we emphasize use of force training. We buy simunition guns, which are like paintball guns, and do realistic training where our officers have to do critical decision making under stress, so that in the reality, or when it really truly happens, they can make those proper decisions and use the proper amount of force. Body cameras were just recently purchased. It was a $100,000 purchase, not including the storage that we have to have, so that number one, we can capture better evidence, but number two, we can have that accountability as well, because what we're doing is being captured on video from that perspective that officer's seeing at that point. So there's a lot of costs associated with good policing, and the 0.5% helps that for us, and it helps our safety of our officers and it helps safety of our citizens.
And as I alluded to, this isn't your grandfather's Buick.
Right.
Just think about talking to a police officer 25 years plus of, one day I'm going to carry a video camera on me every single moment that I'm a police officer. And just think what could change in the next 4 years before this sunsets in 2025.
Absolutely.
Of how much could change in technology and combating crime in St. Mary's and elsewhere. So thanks so much, Chief Sutton. Greatly appreciate the insight. And we're going to take a break, and we'll be back right after this.
Appreciate it.
Welcome back. Here with me now is John Maker, the Superintendent of General Services and Parks. John, thanks so much for being here with us on Rider Nation Station. We're first going to break this down and talk about Parks and Recreation and how the 0.5% voted tax has been able to help out that department. So kind of going to leave it kind of wide open for you. And how has the Parks and Recreation Department utilized those funds?
Well, since I've been here, a lot of it's gone towards the park playground equipment. We have 12 parks. People don't realize that throughout town. And each one of them has a new playground equipment that has been put up throughout these years since the 0.5%. Anyway, what we'd like to do with that, right now we have an engineered wood product that we put underneath there. And we'd like to add the safety rubber underneath the pour it in place so that we don't have to replace that every year. That comes in at like an $18 square foot price. So let's take the Rotary Park by the swimming pool. You're talking $70,000 to replace that. But if you can get a 10-year lifespan, 10-year to 15-year lifespan out of that, depending on how you maintain that, it's well worth it as far as freeing up our people to do other work, because General Services helps out parks quite a bit in that area. And then you have your laser guided ball field. Sounds high tech, but we have a company come in and they skin the fields. It's a $30,000 cost, but to maintain that field saves a lot of time. People can get back on the field a lot quicker. The ball teams can get back there to play, practice. You're saving a lot of headaches that way.
Just to interject real quick, last night the Rider Nation Station did the first baseball game that we've ever done, and our commentators, Jeff Derringer and Russ Bailey, were quite pleased of how good the baseball diamond looked for the varsity game.
They do a lot of work out there. Greg Clark is a supervisor out there, and he does a great job with all the ball diamonds.
So speaking of parks, beyond playground equipment, there's a little bit of grass.
There's a lot of grass. We're talking 93 acres of grass. So it takes a lot of mowing, a lot of equipment to take care of that grass. And we're talking anywhere from $22,000 to $38,000, depending on the mower that we purchase for that. And then you're talking diamond drags and everything else, field groomers. The good thing is, with all of our equipment that runs through the city that we purchase, it's under state bid. So that saves us anywhere from 10, 15, maybe 20%, depending on what piece of equipment we're purchasing. And that's the big thing that has the equipment upgrades have been substantial throughout the years. And the thing of it is, there are a lot of youth groups that depend on this. I mean, we have 14 ball diamonds that get used at one time throughout the summer. You have, I'm thinking, we keep making more and more soccer fields. You have a soccer complex up there. That got moved because we have 3 that have re-groomed. They're getting grass now that we're in a flooded area. We finally put in drainage enough for those to be done. But the soccer complex they were talking about was going to be behind the hospital off of Beach Street with the Beach Street access. But now that with the purchase of the land out by the high school, they're talking about making a big soccer complex out there, and this money would go towards that. Also, Casey Geiger, we put up a new maintenance building so that we don't have to run back and forth from our Chestnut location. We can keep the equipment out there to be more efficient.
Alrighty, so that's Parks and Recreation. General Services, that may be a little bit of a difficult concept for people to understand. What is General Services? What do they actually do, and how is the funding from the 0.5% voted tax utilized for General Services?
We pretty much do everything that the other departments don't do. We take care of
Good
your
catch
snow
up,
removal. And that's a big thing about the 0.5%. The equipment upgrades are unbelievable from when I started until now. But with that being said, the better your equipment, the more efficient you can be. Our snow removal, for instance, we have 4 snow plows, large snow plows in our shop. And with that, we rotate, we buy a new one every 4 years. So the last one going out is 16 years old. If it's a decent plow when it's at that time, maybe it'll go down to the tree trimmers at the electric department. We'll keep it in service. The water department has 2 dump trucks. When we put all of our equipment together, we can pretty much clean up a 6-inch snowstorm in less than 8 hours. All the streets can be cleared. We can go home next day, tidy up a little bit. But everybody can get to work and get to where they need to be. That's the biggest thing that has happened. Also, our leaf picking. We went from 2 leaf pickers, 6-man crew, down to 1 leaf picker. Now that leaf picker was $160,000, but we were able to take 5 guys, put them in a different area, work on different projects, maybe farm them out to the parks, help parks out when they need it, do projects that we don't have to farm out, cost us less to do, as well, for instance, pouring the concrete around our building. We had asphalt around our buildings. It was becoming deteriorated. The 0.5% pays for the concrete. We do the labor. We can get twice as much done that way. So in essence, it really helps. And then also back to the parks, the splash pad. Some of that was grant money, but part of that was also the 0.5%. And that was a great success last year. If anybody drove by the splash pad, you can see how many kids were out there enjoying that.
So that deals with water on a positive side, water on maybe not such a positive side, stormwater.
The storm sewers. Yes, and Craig mentioned that with the street programs, we try to eliminate all those problems by putting in larger stormwater, but you can only get away so much stormwater at one time. You can't pass it on to your neighbor. So we have retention ponds. We maintain the retention ponds. That comes in with mowing. We have a lot of right-of-ways that we have to mow underneath the power lines, under our retention ponds, the right-of-ways as you come into town. We take care and maintain all of that with our mowers. And every department has pretty much its own mowers because there is so much grass to mow and maintain.
So here you can see some of the equipment that General Services
Our street
utilizes.
street sweeper, keeping the streets clean. Every other week we send those out to keep everything out of the storms, which helps quite a bit. We have a hill mower, which we used to push mow Main Street Hill by hand. We'd have 6 to 8 guys push mowing that. That makes it a lot safer. One man job for a couple hours, so the other guys can be freed up to do other projects. And that hill mower is also going to be utilized when the new pedestrian bridge goes over to the high school, because the hills, there's going to be some slope there. And that was one of the questions that was brought to my attention, is that thing going to be able to do it? And it will be able to do that.
All righty, John, we appreciate your insight into what is General Services, the role they play for the city of St. Mary's, and how they are impacted with the 0.5% income tax that St. Maryans have voted since 1985 every 10 years.
And I'd like to thank the citizens for all they do for us, because we couldn't do it without them. It works both ways.
Alrighty, welcome back, and we're with our last guest tonight here on Rider Nation Station, John Butt, First Ward Council Person. John, thanks for being here on Rider Nation Station tonight.
Thank you, Doug.
And you basically get to wrap everything that's been said already and come up with a final answer of why deviate from the every 10-year ask of the voters to asking May 4th to make this permanent for the city of St. Mary's?
Yes, sir. And I kind of look at this as threefold. Three items that are reason why we want this permanent tax. The first one is stability. And as you've heard throughout all the other guys talking about the equipment, the vehicles, everything that we purchase, if we didn't have this tax, then we wouldn't have any stability. So the tax that we have now, of course, it's voted on every 10 years. Think about it. What if that levy failed? What if that tax failed? We wouldn't have any of the items, the equipment that this city garners, and it helps the citizens of St. Mary's. So it's a good reason why to go permanent. The second reason is flexibility. And flexibility I'm talking about, and you may have heard Dan talk about this earlier, we have the general services or the general account, and we have the voted tax. Instead of going into the general account all the time and taking money out, we can use this voted tax to purchase and help purchase items. We don't have to take out of the general. Sometimes the general account can get a little tight, and we've done a great job in the past of making sure that we watch that account. So this does give us some flexibility, okay? The third item is borrowing strength. If we go to a bank in our current situation with a voted 10-year tax, a bank may look at us and say, hey, we want to borrow some money, but they may look and say, well, you have some risk. You have some risk in the $1.5 million that may not ever come back because the tax may get voted down. So making it permanent gives us better borrowing strength in the fact that we can also get a better interest rate because we don't have that risk. The bank's going to look at us in a favorable light, and we'll get a better interest rate. So this is the biggest reason for making it permanent, because the interest rate, a better interest rate, means we will be paying less for a loan, and that's passed on to every citizen of St. Mary's. So that is one of the biggest reasons, and those are the threefold reasons why we want this tax to be permanent.
And as we mentioned before, this would just supplant the 10-year voted. It's not an addition, it's just the same 0.5%. The term is what's different, instead of going 10 years into perpetuity.
Yep, exactly right, Doug. We would not vote on this any longer. It would just be a permanent 0.5% tax added onto the 1%, which is 1.5% total.
So the last question I have for you, maybe a tough question, maybe not. What do you say to the resident who says, I like using this as a grade card, seeing how well the city does and saying yes or no every 10 years?
Well, I think that we've shown in the last 35 years that we've been good stewards of the money. We have not taken this money and purchased anything other than safety, fire, general services, engineering. We have not used it in any other way. So we've been good stewards, and we will continue that as well. So I think that we have a good grade card right now, and I don't think it's going to change.
All righty. John Butt, First Ward Council Person, thank you so much for wrapping it up for us here on the podcast. We have come to the end of our show. It is our hope at Rider Nation Station this podcast entertained, educated, enlightened, or elevated your perspective about St. Mary's, Ohio. We hope a story's been told that augments the development of relationships, old and new, to promote growth for all who do, did, and will call St. Mary's, Ohio home. Join us next month for our vodcast with my childhood role model, a standout basketball and baseball player for Memorial High School, an author, a minister, a professor, and just one of the nicest human beings I have ever met. Tommy Petter will join us for our May vodcast. I hope you think positively about our town, the town we did not inherit from our ancestors, but the town we borrowed from our grandchildren. Peace to you, my fellow St. Marians, past, present, and future, always and always.
Thanks for watching another episode of Rider Nation Station. Help us help you by subscribing on YouTube or following us on Facebook.